Good afternoon, everybody. I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard, and I would like to welcome you to the first episode of my eight-part series. I have pretty much watched every Humphrey Bogart movie. So, what I'm going to do is rank them all. Now, with this first episode, because in total he was in 76 movies officially, one part was cut because he's only appeared in deleted scenes, and then there was miscellaneous cameo appearances and whatnot, archive footage for one that wouldn't really count totally as it. Plus, of course, there's many documentaries which I will not mention in this episode, but one of note that I would highly recommend if you're a big Bogart fan is Life in Flashes, which I watched last year for the first time. I watched it a couple times. I really enjoyed it. And if this cat would stop bothering me, I could get on with the episode. So, okay. This episode is going to go because I've pretty much written down up to 80 as far as a list. With this episode, it won't get too much into the ranking because as of total, I have seen 72 and I could say that eventually it would be possible to watch 73, maybe more. Two are too hard to find, and a lot of them are really just uncredited cameos. But I have also seen some of the ones mentioned in this miscellaneous list to start this episode. This cat is just being insane, craving attention right now, so bear with me. So at number 80, we'll start with 80, the TV version of the Petrified Forest. Now, this is one of the few times Bogart actually acted seriously in a television program, which is sort of a live staged play adaptation of the Petrified Forest, which he had done many times on the theater circuit before becoming a prominent star acting as Duke Mantee in the film version. The film version will be covered later on in this list, but the TV adaptation is quite good. It really shows Bogart's star power by that point in his career because he got top billing, even though you would really look at Henry Fonda, who was Alan Squire's character in the TV version, and Lauren Bacall, who played Gabby Maple's version in the TV version, as being kind of the bigger characters, the main characters, right? Now, in the film version, those roles are played by Leslie Howard, who we will talk more about in this list, and of course, the legendary and famous, beautiful Betty Davis. So that falls in at number 80. It's worth mentioning. Next for 79, we have You Murderer, which is a Tales from the Crypt episode where they use CGI to bring Bogart back from the dead to appear in this episode. They basically use archive footage from his films to project his face onto mirror reflections so that you see most of this episode from the first person point of view. It's narrated by a Humphrey Bogart impersonator named Robert Sachi, and that's sort of his voice. But this character that you don't really see in other sort of forms of view is Bogart's face because of plastic surgery. Very entertaining episode. There's some really good actors in that episode. And just the fact that they were able to bring Humphrey Bogart back from the dead for another role 40 years after he died, which was actually hinted at in one of the documentaries about him. It's just a really cool idea. So I felt it was worth mentioning. Now, this one I have not seen. The first two I have seen, which is why I could give a lot more details about them. The reason I haven't seen it, I probably could see it. I might actually go looking for this later on after this episode just to see if I could watch some of these uncredited cameos just so I might be able to actually provide some insight in the future episodes, right? Now, this one is called The Love Lottery. He had an uncredited cameo in that. Not really a starring role or anything, but he is mentioned as being in it. So it actually seems worth seeing if I can spot him in it. seeing where he was in the movie, and I would be interested to see it. Now, 77 is a film called Two Guys from Milwaukee, which him and his wife Lauren Bacall actually have an uncredited cameo of being at a restaurant eating together. Haven't seen it, but another one I think is worth maybe checking out just to see if I spot it. And then, of course, that would be another one of the Humphrey Bogarts under my belt. Now, from this list, you might be confused and say, well, like, there's two already you haven't seen. Yes, but uncredited cameos, not like starring roles are actually in the billing of credits, right? Now, with most of the ones where he's actually billed as an actor and has like a significant starring role in it, I've seen 72 of them in total. And if you count You Murderer, the Tales from the Crypt episode, the TV version of the Petrified Forest, that would actually bring you up to 74 out of 80. So, just thought I would point that out moving forward. Now, for 76, Women of All Nations, he was in this movie. He is credited as being in this movie and having somewhat of a decent role in it. However, by the time the film was finished with its printing, its editing, and made it into circulation, theaters, and whatnot for its time, one of his first movies, of course, his scenes were deleted. Therefore, you would not see him in the final cut of the movie. Um, for the 75, Body and Soul, and this is actually the same thing with 74, A Devil with Women. These are movies where he is known to have roles in them. They're very early on in his career. Some people might have access to them as far as like if it's preserved on the old-fashioned film reels in a museum or something, you might be able to see them. But as of now, there's no DVD copies, there's no streaming format. If somebody was ever able to get a copy of this, of any of these, A Body and Soul and A Devil with Women, I would love to get a copy and watch it just so I could say I've seen every Bogart movie. But until then, I don't know if I ever will, which is part of why I delayed this list and finally decided I should just do it anyway because realistically, I may never get to watch them unless I went to a museum and found a film reel copy, or if somebody does have a copy, sends it my way. Now, with 73, Always Together, this is one where he has probably the most minuscule role. He basically parodies himself crying in a window, and ironically, it's like within the TV, so it's a small sort of uncredited cameo in some regards, but he is mentioned as being in it, probably because he was such a big figure in the Hollywood circuit by that time. This was later in the 40s. And Always Together is available if you buy the DVD, not on any streaming platforms, unfortunately, which is why I haven't watched it yet. But I have considered buying a copy of the DVD, perhaps after my trip to Japan, because then I'll be able to actually say I've seen it at least. So that's 73. And now, with conclusion, we will get into Midnight, aka Call It Murder. Now, with this particular movie, this is one of his first ones. In fact, it was originally just called Midnight, but after Bogart became a bigger star because he wasn't really that recognizable or very standoutish as a character in this movie, right? So they obviously just called it Midnight. He was with another legendary actress who had a mysterious death, only had a couple roles. Some were very notable. Another one was an even better movie with Humphrey Bogart, which was her film debut. I apologize for the air conditioning. I actually wanted to do this in my room, but my stupid fag neighbor next door decided he's going to mow the lawn and create static and background noise in the middle of my recording. So I was like, fuck this guy. But anyways, I'm just going to turn it off for now so I can, speak clearly uninterrupted. Of course, the cat meowing in the background is going to obviously create background noise too, but that's unavoidable. Even if I was in my room, she'd probably stand outside the door and meow, meow, meow. She's in the heat, so she's all wild and nuts right now. But yeah, back to what I was saying. So yeah, it was originally called Midnight, and it starred Sydney Fox as the main actress, who was also the top billed. And legend has it she was a mistress to Carl Laemmle Jr., who ran Universal Studios back then. Producer behind some of the big movies like, of course, The Wolfman. Well, maybe not The Wolfman, but definitely Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Bride of Frankenstein, all those, right? So, yeah. And she, of course, was a very important character in this story. Actually, Bogart's character is important to the story. He does have some memorable, iconic lines, in my opinion. Maybe considering he's got so many classics, this is why this is so far the way down there. But at one point, he says, I'm not about to sit back and start wearing golf panties. And that was probably one of the funniest lines he had in the whole movie that I remember. It was a good scene. So that's probably what I could say is the highlight of that movie. Overall, the story is pretty good. It's just the reason I put it at number 72 of this list is just not that much Bogart in it, and I really wish there would have been more Bogart in it, and then it probably would have made it higher on this list. But overall, that's what I will say moving forward too with these episodes in the show. Pretty much every movie of Bogart's overall is good. They all come from that classic era of cinema where I would rather watch any of the classic movies in cinema than I would most of the modern stuff, right? So it's not to discredit it in any way. Now, because I originally was thinking of making this an eight-part series, there's really not that much to talk about with this sort of miscellaneous round off list from 80 to 71. This episode will be shorter. You can consider it like the sort of halfway length pilot of what the rest of the episodes will be like. The rest of the episodes, especially because there will be so much more to talk about, will probably be about a half an hour to 45 minutes, depending on how much of a tangent I get on, maybe describing some of the later movies down the list, the ones closer to one. Those might have more for me to say about them, more of my reaction, why I love them so much. So, with that said, those episodes should be longer. This one, just because a lot of it is miscellaneous stuff and the very bottom of the list, because as I've said, of the ones other than You Murderer and the TV version of the Petrified Forest, I've only seen 70 of this 80 list. So we got to Midnight, which is 72, aka Call It Murder, which they changed at the title and re-released when he became a bigger star. That is the very bottom of the list. Now, for the second bottom, we have A Holy Terror. Now, this movie actually, considering the film quality, is very rough. Very, very rough, right? What I could say about this movie overall that makes it really good despite the rough film quality is the fact that Bogart is fantastic in this. And it's kind of a Western, which is not really his sort of area of expertise. He doesn't even get top billing. He is kind of like one of the sort of henchman to the antagonist, which you actually find out later on is not really the bad guy at all, but is only sort of portrayed to be the bad guy. Now, with A Holy Terror, what makes this really good is it's a pre-code Western movie. There's a lot of really dark, suspenseful ideas behind it. Now, with Midnight, aka Call It Murder, it's basically woman has a love for a boy who's Humphrey Bogart. He's sort of into some gangsta Chicago stuff. He's on the run. There's a child that's driving her father mad who was on the jury, and he basically helped put her in the electric chair. The daughter feels bad. She identifies. She basically is in a spot where her boyfriend Humphrey Bogart gets shot. She basically pulls the gun on him and thinks that she shot him, but really he was killed by nearby gangsters, which ends up freeing her of the suspicion. She doesn't end up going to jail or the chair. Now, the plot with A Holy Terror is much different. Polo player Tony Barr travels west to investigate his father's murder and meets Jerry Foster on a Wyoming ranch. After being kidnapped, Tony escapes and discovers his true father. He also learns that he was raised by another man who was in love with his mother. Bogart in this movie plays the henchman Steve Nash. Very diabolical, very ruthless, and considering westerns were not Bogart's specialty, and the quality is really rough because this is like 1930, 1931, so they were still just starting to get the hang of using sound pictures, right? But of course, some of them have been remastered, so they're not as choppy. The copy I saw was definitely not remastered. However, the overall story and the acting of the movie was quite good. I give it that. For a very early movie, it showed right off the bat what kind of potential Bogart had. I think it's very underrated, but at the same time, I can kind of understand why it's underrated. The poor quality, westerns weren't really Bogart's thing. He's not really a lead, so I could see it. But does he do very well in this movie as the evil henchman? Oh, yeah, he's very diabolical. He's very sarcastic. He's kind of ruthless. The way he's hunting after the main character, Tony, it's just a great story. I actually was surprised how much I liked this. And as far as like what I could say as far as feedback, like with Call It Murder, it was just not enough Bogart. That would kind of be my drawback with this one, but also the poor film quality. Whereas I've seen a remastered version of Midnight, aka Call It Murder, the quality was a lot better. But overall, I do think that Bogart had a more standoutish role than Call It Murder and Midnight. So that's why overall I gotta rank it a little higher because I really think, especially for an early Bogart movie, he does a really, really good job in it. So that brings us to A Holy Terror. Now we will do a quick recap to round off this episode of where we are so far. And since this was only two of the real list, moving forward, the next one will take place from 70 to 61, just so you know where we're starting next episode. So you will get another 10 on the countdown with the next episode. And look forward because we really only scratched the two bottoms of the list and miscellaneous cameos. So the next list is going to be more in depth discussion. I guarantee it's going to be a lot longer because I'm actually going to try and go more in depth with the movies I've seen, the same way I did with Midnight, aka Call It Murder, and A Holy Terror. It's going to be like that for every one of the next 10. So there's going to be a lot more to talk about. The episode's going to be a lot longer. But as I said, to wrap it up and get for where we are in the list, at 80, we have the television version of The Petrified Forest. At 79, we have You Murderer archive footage. Well done, though, for a Tales from the Crypt episode. For 78, we have The Love Lottery, where he has an uncredited cameo. Still have not seen that. Two Guys from Milwaukee, him and Lauren Bacall have an uncredited cameo at 77. And at 76, we have Women of All Nations, where his scenes were deleted and he is not in the final cut. At 75, we have Body and Soul, which is a film I've not seen and would be very difficult to see unless you have like either some version that is downloadable is floating around out there, or like you'd have to watch the original film reels of the film. At 74, we have A Devil with Women, same as Body and Soul, pretty much exactly. I have heard that somebody did watch it before in a museum, but unless you go to this museum and watch it on the old film reel, it's probably hard to watch. For 73, we have a very small appearance in the romantic film Always Together, which is available on DVD, and I will try to hunt down a copy of to watch in the future. For 72, we have the bottom of the list, Midnight, also known as Call It Murder, when it was re released after Bogart became a bigger star, and 71, A Holy Terror, rounding off the bottom of the start of this list. Now, I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I hope you will look forward to the next episode, which will have a lot more of a discussion and go more in depth on the next 10 of this Bogart list. And of course, because it's the bottom of the list, these are not going to be the bigger, significant roles that perhaps most people would know him for, that made him famous, that people would know him for even still to this day. But I could say they're all still pretty decent, even if they're on the lower end of the list. And some of them I would even say are kind of underrated gems. It's just they're obviously not as good as the ones higher up. So, I hope you enjoyed this. As usual, I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard, and until next time when we come back for the next 10 on the Humphrey Bogart countdown, which will be 70 to 71, stay tuned, and I hope you liked it. Here's looking at you, kid. And until next time, matinee. Peace out. No Yasumi Nasai. Have a good afternoon, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world, everyone. And take care. That's all for now. And hopefully, you'll definitely come back for the next installment in this series, because I promise it will be way better.